Everybody. My name is Heath Adams, aka the Cyber Mentor, and I am pleased to be here at CIA Conference as your keynote speaker. This is actually my first keynote talk, so bear with me as we go through this, but I'm completely honored for this opportunity, and I hope that you enjoy the story I'm about to give you. So I was asked to come and speak, and I was told that I could speak freely about bridging the gap between cybersecurity and what we think a hacker is. And you kind of think of the hacker as the bad guy in the hoodie, and there's really a whole field out there of being hackers. And I want to take that from my perspective and talk about my journey as to how I became a ethical hacker and how other people can do it too. So we're going to go through kind of my life story and kind of talk my journey through and hopefully motivate some of you that might be interested in getting to this field as well. So I'm only going to share one PowerPoint slide with you today. That is going to be my little who am I. So who am I? Well, I'm a husband first, a hacker second. I'm actually a military veteran, having served in the Army Reserves and the medical side. I'm a big sports fan, a video gamer, and I'm also an animal dad. I'm actually a former accountant that turned into a security geek, and we'll talk a little bit more about my accounting background here in just a few minutes. On the day-to-day, I am the CEO of a cybersecurity company called TCM Security. We focus on traditional cybersecurity consulting and ethical hacking. I'm also an instructor at TCM Security Academy, and I have personally taught over 175,000 students on the Security Academy as well as Udemy. And on YouTube, I've taught over 140,000 subscribers now. If you're interested in contacting me in any way, I have a Twitch, YouTube, and Twitter. You can also reach out to me at thecybermentor.com or on my business website of tcm-sec.com. So I want to share my life story with you and my background, as I think it's incredibly relevant as to how I got to be where I'm at now. I learned a lot of life lessons along the way, and I didn't take a straight path into cybersecurity. I took a very winded path into cybersecurity, and if you talk to a lot of people in cybersecurity, you'll find that there's very similar backgrounds in that sense, that people came from all different walks of life before they found their way into cyber. And maybe 10 years ago, 15 years ago, we weren't even thinking about security as a thing. Most of us weren't. So you can see all these walks of life and their journeys, and I'm going to share mine today with you and hope that you learn something from it. So I grew up very, very poor. I grew up as an only child, of a mother who also was an only child. I didn't have a father figure in my life, and his family was not in our lives. My grandmother, she passed away when I was 5. My grandfather passed away before I could even remember him. And with that being said, we didn't have any family. It was just my mom and I growing up, and that was really it. And because we grew up poor, I got to see a lot of different things and experience a lot of different things. I went to a school district where I was the minority. I was 1% actually. Most people were of this mixed variety of ethnicities and backgrounds, and it was this melting pot. And I think that was the first great experience that I had, was to be able to see people from all different walks of life and journeys, and go to a school where this melting pot existed, and I got to be friends with all these other people. On the other side of the thing too, though, when you're so poor, and we were on government assistance, I remember our housing was paid for, food was paid for, like we had food stamps. I remember clearly, vividly, that my mom would, write bad checks just to get by. If we needed food or go to the grocery store and we didn't have the money, she would write bad check to get it. And it was another side of seeing, the downside of being poor, and it leads you to having some bad motivators in life, which we'll talk about, but it leads to having this motivator of wanting to have money and not have to worry about that lifestyle anymore. And that lifestyle, eventually caught up to my mom. My mom actually ended up going to jail for doing that when I was 14 years old, 13 years old. And this isn't really a story that I've actually shared with many people, but my mom went to jail for doing illegal activities, writing bad checks and such. And at the time when she went to jail, I was actually placed into a group home. So in the United States, we have what's called foster homes, and we have group homes. Group homes, in my opinion, is the worst of the two, because you're actually put into this house with other individuals. In my case, there was 10 other individuals or 9 other individuals, where they had committed some sort of crime in their past, or they had been to a juvenile detention center, and they were overall just people that were part of the system. So for me personally, I was coming from a background where I had never committed a crime, I had never done anything, and now I was in this household of this group of people where they had committed crimes, and we'd all come from poor, diverse backgrounds, so we did share some commonalities, and it was just it was very tough getting situated growing up. And there were a lot of instances where I think I could have fallen off the rails. But my mom, I will give her credit, was always the one who pushed me to be something that she wasn't. So my mom was a 9th grade dropout. So in the United States, we go to school through 12th grade. She did not finish high school. She dropped out in 9th grade. I believe my dad also dropped out in 9th grade. My grandparents never finished high school either. They were immigrants, and so it was kind of on me to be the first generation to even graduate high school. But I remember my mom always wanting more for me. She wanted me to go to college. She wanted me to get a degree, to make something of myself. And I'm in this group home at 14. She does her time. She gets out. She gets me back, and I'm living with her again, and I'm about 15 years old, and I push through. I do okay in high school. I get into a pretty good college, a top 50 school in the United States, and I go away from school, and one day I'm coming home, and I'm home for a Thanksgiving break. My mom, unbeknownst to me, was actually into heavy drugs. So she was into heroin, which I wasn't aware about. This is something that was kind of new to me. But she actually overdosed while I was home for Thanksgiving, and passed away. She was in a coma for a little bit, passed away about a month later. So by the time that I was 19 years old, I was out of college, still very poor, still very fresh to the world. I didn't know much of what I was going to do, and I was placed into a situation now where I didn't have any family members because my mom passed away. I didn't really have a sense of purpose or a sense of where I wanted to be in life. And at that point in time, I thought of all different things that I could do to get out of where I was in, that position I was in. You think of the worst possible things. You think of, maybe I buy drugs and try to deal them. How do you make money? How do you get out of this mess? If you're a college student and you're trying to make ends meet, how do you work and go to school full time with no support while having to pay rent, while having to do everything else? And for me personally, it was a situation where I hadn't really had to pay bills before. I didn't really have to do anything. My mom took care of all that. So it was very much a culture shock, to the point where I had to drop out of the school that I was in and move to another college just to come back home and take care of the assets, take care of everything that was there. So even more starting to lean into that money motivator. I started becoming very motivated by money. How do I make money? Can I, like I said, can I deal drugs? Can I get jobs? What do I do in order to get into this money? And growing up poor will do that to you. It'll motivate you to do things. And we see that even as an off tangent with cyber criminals now and COVID-19, there's an increase in criminal activity. And it's not just because everybody's at home. It's because a lot of these people, if they're getting laid off in their jobs or they don't have work, they're going to turn and look to a lifestyle of crime or something else in order to make money. And that's how we develop the the bad side of hacking too. So money is a big motivator when you're poor, and you look at it in the wrong light sometimes, and that's what I was doing. But I was determined to finish college. I was very, very determined to finish college. I wasn't sure what I wanted to do with my life. I thought that I wanted to be a lawyer. I thought that that was my passion, or something that would be good enough for me on my end that I can make good money. And towards the end of studying, I had actually gotten to my senior year in college. I had taken my law school entrance exams. They're called LSATs here. And I started applying for law schools. But I realized that I was doing that not because I was passionate about it, and not because I wanted to go to school for 3 more years, but because I was looking at how much money a lawyer could make. And would I be happy spending the rest of my life as a lawyer? And the answer was no. And so I thought about it, and I said to myself, what could I do in my life right now when I don't know the answer to what I want to do? And for me personally, I chose business. I didn't know what I wanted to do in business. I knew that I was good with numbers. And for me, I turned to accounting because I knew I would be good at it. I thought it was pretty safe. Everybody needs an accountant. They're never going to be shortage of jobs for accounting. So I ended up going to school and finishing my degree in accounting. And from there, I ended up actually getting a MBA in computer information systems and finished grad school as well. I did spend time in between working in public accounting, and quickly I realized that accounting wasn't for me. So in between going to grad school and doing accounting, or working as an accountant, I was working maybe 60 hours, 70 hours a week. And when you really take it and break it down, I was working for a minimum wage. I think my starting salary was something around, I think it was $40,000 a year. And that, depending where you live, could be a lot, couldn't be that much. But for an accountant, it's really not that great, especially when you're working 60 hours, 70 hours here. I could be working minimum wage somewhere and be making the same amount for those dollars. So it was very disheartening. And part of me was just seeking something different, and I didn't know what it was that I was seeking or what I wanted to be. So I joined the Army. That was my next logical thing. I said, I've never had a journey before. I always wanted to do something honorable. I wanted to serve my country. I wanted to get out. I'd never been on an airplane before. My first flight was actually to basic training when I was in the Army. So I wanted to do something different. I was told by my recruiter when I was going through that you should pick something different than you do in an everyday life, because you will get very tired if you're an accountant in the public life and you're an accountant in the military as well. And I went for the reserves so that way I could still have a public career and work on my life on that side, and still have a service career as well. So I ended up choosing the medical field, and I had a great experience in that. When I came back, I went into my MBA program and I graduated that. And from there, I had decided, I think I want to go into IT, but I wasn't really sure. So a little bit of background into the IT side of things. I got a computer. I remember when I was 4 years old. I'm pretty sure my mom cut a bad check for that, but don't judge me for it. It was a Hewlett Packard. This is before they were even HP, I think. It was just Hewlett Packard, and it was, I think, a 1500 megahertz computer, and I think it cost quite a bit of money. It was quite a bit of money back then. I remember we were running on Prodigy as a service, and then we ran on AOL, of course. And growing up, I remember coding on AOL. We would make chatbots. I remember getting hit with my first attack, or somebody hacked me with a virus, and they made me download something, and they were opening my CD drive, closing my CD drive. They could turn your screen blue. There were so many different things that we were doing to each other back in the day. And this was I think my early exposure to hacking and coding and all that stuff. And my mom, I remember for a time, also went to community college, and she was bringing home her homework and her books. And one of the classes she was taking was algebra. Another class she was taking was intro to web design. And I remember learning HTML out of her books and building websites. And also I remember doing college level algebra when I was 10. It was just something that was fascinating to me. I love the math, the logical side. I love the coding and development side. And it was just something that got my wheels spinning. So fast forward back to graduating my MBA program, the thought had entered my head that I want to get into IT. I didn't know what I was going to do yet. So I started applying to just general IT jobs, like help desk positions. I wasn't getting a single call back. Meanwhile, a company here in the States came to me and said, we'll pay you $55,000 if you come move to our location and be an accountant for us. And I said, oh boy, $55,000? That's so much money. I've never heard of that much money for me personally in my life. And remember, I was making $40,000 before. And again, I was back to being an accountant, but this time it was even worse. Because in order to take this money and take this decision, I had to move to the middle of nowhere. And I had the choice to move where I wanted. And I remember picking a location that had a Walmart here, so a big superstore that I could shop at, because otherwise everything was so remote and so country that there was just nothing. And my drive to work, just to put this into perspective, I drove 45 minutes each way to work on a 2-lane highway. So one car going this way, one car coming this way. And I often had to say, hey, I'm late today because there was farming equipment in the road driving 5 miles an hour and you just could not get around it. So I was really in the middle of nowhere. I left any friends that I had behind. I actually had a girlfriend that I left behind. Anything that was important to me, I left. And I left it for what? For money, for a job. I didn't even want to be in accounting anymore. I left accounting. I joined the Army. I went into my master's program thinking I was going to do something different. I was thinking about IT, but the money came back to me. And this is part of my roots. This is part of being poor. I thought to myself, I need to do this because it's going to help me financially. And I was always thinking, what can I be next? What new job can I move into? Once I'm at this job, can I become a controller or something, move up? And how much money can I make? That was always the question I would ask. It wasn't like, what is the job details? What does the job do? It was always, how much money can I make? So I became very hyper-focused on that, to the point where I would leave an entire life behind to go live miserably and earn money. And over time, I learned that it really wasn't the job for me. I would go into work and it was nighttime when I left. It was dark out when I left. I would get home, it was dark out. I was working long hours plus driving an hour and a half each day if I was lucky and didn't get stuck behind any farming equipment. So with that, on top of having a very bad manager, and please take this or don't take this lightly, I do not badmouth many people in my life, but this manager was the micromanager of all micromanagers. Just one example that I like to give to put it into perspective is, one day I was leaving at 4:59. We get out at 5 o'clock. I was done for the day, clocked out, ready to leave. 4:59. She stops me and says, "Where are you going? It is not 5 o'clock yet." It didn't matter if the work was done. It didn't matter about anything. It was 1 minute to go and you had not completed your shift. Somebody breathing down your neck constantly 24/7. And come to learn, once I took the job, she had one person below her in the position, and I was her 9th person below her in 3 years. That means every person before me had quit and moved on somewhere else. So when you have a pattern to a problem, it becomes evident, but apparently they weren't seeing it. So I became victim number 9. And one day I got to the point where I was honestly fed up. It was just another day of being unhappy, just dreading going into work. I went into work and I remember that I had gotten so frustrated, not that I advocate any of this, but I had gotten so frustrated that I took my company card, I took my ID, I took everything that belonged to the company and I left it on my desk. I walked out at lunchtime and I never came back. I never went back. That was my last day as an accountant and I never would ever go back. I swore that to myself. I went home. I went to the management office of where I lived. I broke my lease. I rented a U-Haul and I made the effort of moving out west. Now, this was on a complete whim. I didn't have the money for it. I didn't really have the cash. I had a credit card. Thank you for that. Thankfully for that, but I had a very, very, very distant relative that lived in this town called Albuquerque, New Mexico. So I drove out there with all my stuff in a U-Haul. She was somebody that I found on happenstance on Facebook, and she said, "Hey, you can come, stay with me for a little bit, get on your feet." And when I got out there, it turned out that she unfortunately was on drugs too. So it was like another situation where I seemed like I couldn't get away from it. And I just told myself, I need to get away from this kind of environment. This is what I grew up in. It's not good. It's not healthy. And I got out of there as quick as possible. And I just thought, how am I going to hustle? What am I going to do? I started applying for jobs. And this is really one of the big life lessons that I learned, on top of the money thing. But we're going to get into the money thing a little bit here down the road in the story. One of the bigger life lessons I learned is when I was applying for these jobs in IT, I was looking at help desk. I had no credentials. Okay. I had my MBA. It was in information systems. I had passion. I did not have any knowledge whatsoever. I had been using a computer since I was 4 years old. I was very well versed with computer platforms, troubleshooting, etc., to an extent. But I remember going into the application process and seeing all different types of jobs and their requirements. And they had, you need 3 years of experience, you need A plus, Net plus, Security plus, all these certifications that I just didn't have. And there was this one job where they offered $50,000, which was a little less than I was making. This was on the job description. They offered $50,000. They wanted 3 years of experience. They wanted at least an A plus and a Net plus certification. And I became very discouraged. I almost clicked close out of the application, but something told me you need to apply to this job. And I did. I applied to the job, and I actually got called back for an interview. And that was the time that I learned, that was my first lesson, that the job requirements are there, but it's not necessary. You can ignore them. Okay. You need to be the job requirement. You don't need to focus on the job requirements. You need to make yourself the requirement. You need to make the job want you. And we'll talk about that too. But when you're up against these jobs and you're trying to apply and get into the field, whether it be information security or anything, you're going to see these outlandish job requirements and just ignore them. Apply. The worst thing that can happen is they say no to you. That's the absolute worst thing. So you might get rejected. That's okay. You go and you apply to a different job or a different company. If somebody's interested in you, if you can make yourself a desirable candidate, they will overlook the job requirement or the experience requirement or certain certifications. So going into that interview, I didn't know what to expect. And I got there, and they were asking me different types of troubleshooting questions, and some I knew, some I really didn't know at all. And they could tell, and they talked to me at the interview. They said, "I can tell that you don't know a lot." And I said, "That's true." And that's another thing too. During the interview, be very honest. If you're interviewing for anything, be incredibly honest. Don't try to BS any interviewer. They're going to know if you're trying to make stuff up, especially if they know the right answer. So what you need to do is say, "I don't know, but I will find out," and just be very honest. And when we got into the conversation, I said, "Look, I am here because I am passionate about IT. I'm passionate about being in this field. I don't know everything. I don't want to tell you that I know everything, because I don't. And I will give you 110% effort, but I just need you to take a chance on me." And with that, I also offered them to pay me less. I said, "Let me prove to you that I can be your ideal candidate. I will take less money to be here, and I will work my tail off, and I will be the candidate that you want." And they brought me back for another interview. And I ended up acing it, and I got the job. So their job posting was for $50,000 a year. I ended up getting a job. I think it was for 41.5, 42. So it was a pretty significant pay cut than what I was at with the 55,000. But nonetheless, I was now in IT. I was now at this job where I could be myself and I could learn about everything. And boy, did I learn about everything, because when I got there, I thought I knew some stuff. I did not know much. I had to be taught what Active Directory was. I had to be taught what DNS was, DHCP, any sort of networking protocol. And it was just study, study, study all the time. So I made it a point that I wanted to get my A plus, and I did that. Net plus, Security plus, CEH, I did all that. I did all that while I was still at this job. And what I would do is if it was slow, there were no tickets coming in, I would be studying. And if I would go home, I would study because I knew I wanted to grow and develop. I knew I didn't want to be in help desk forever, though I didn't know what I wanted to be at that time. I knew that if I was going to get there, I had to do more than what I was just doing now. And I have a really good friend who would always tell me, he was my coworker from this job. It's actually where we met. He would tell me, "You're no fun. All you do is study. You don't want to play with me." We used to play like Tetris or do dumb stuff on lunch, and it became to the point where I was really motivated to just get these certifications knocked out that I even started putting my friends off a little bit. And he would just tell me these things. Hey, you're no fun. And it's true. Maybe you're not, but if it's something that involves career advancement, sometimes you have to be no fun. So it got to the point to where one day he and I were actually having a conversation, and he said to me, "Do you know that people get paid to hack?" And I said, "What do you mean? Like the bad guys?" He's like, "No, there's a whole field out there called ethical hackers, and you can get paid to hack into people." And I just thought that was absolutely crazy because my whole experience has just been watching the movies and seeing the TV shows, and people are hacking into things, and it's always the bad guy. It's always somebody in a hoodie or a dark uniform, typing very fast, things running across the screen. Nobody ever explains it to you that there can be good hackers too. So a little light bulb went off in my head, and immediately I became fascinated. And I started going out, I started looking, and this is a great advice for anybody that's interested in anything. Google is your absolute best friend. Google is going to be your best friend throughout your IT career. But I would go Google things and I would say, how do you become an ethical hacker? And I would look on Reddit. Reddit's a very great resource into finding out all kinds of questions. If you have a question, there's a chance that it's been asked on Reddit and somebody's answered it. So I looked and tried to just figure out what things I needed to do, or what did I need to study to get into this field. And I kept seeing the same things over and over. You need to know Linux. You need to know some sort of coding language. So Python would be useful. You need to have a good networking background. Chances are that you need some work experience before you get into the field. You also need to understand the network side, so network methodology, pen test methodology. You need to understand web app pen test methodology. On top of all that, it's good to have certifications like the OSCP. And I just started thinking about, okay, what do I need to do? At that time, I think I only had the A+. And I just told myself, what do I need to do to get better? How do I get better? How do I improve? And how do I set this plan forward? So I set a goal for myself. I said, I want to be a pen tester in the next 2 years. And it came down to learning a few lessons there. With the studying part, when you move up in the ranks, you're going to find that you're going to find a lot of people that are complacent, okay? When I was studying A+, Net+, Security+, and I was in my job working help desk, there were people that were at that job that had been in the same position for 10 years. There's nothing wrong with being in the same position for 10 years, but it's a little bit of complacency. You can be complacent if you're happy, but for me, I wasn't happy. I wasn't the type of person that wanted to stay in the job for 10 years. I had goals. I had places I wanted to be. So if you have people that try to tell you, hey, you're not being any fun, or this isn't, I don't like that you're studying all the time, but if it's your career, your decision, your motivation, and it's what makes you happy, that should be your priority. That should be your priority with work. I'm not saying to completely write out family or friends completely, but if you have goals and you set them for yourself, that should be a top priority. So that is goal number one here, is do not be a complacent person, especially if you're trying to get into information security. Ethical hacking, just as an example, there are new attacks, new CVEs, new everything released all the time. There's also new defenses released all the time. It's a cat and mouse game. There's always new things. If you take a ethical hacking person and you leave them alone for 2 years, they pick up no new knowledge over 2 years, chances are they're going to be left behind. This field is just always evolving. You need to be studying constantly, and that always learning mentality, like what I'm describing of wanting to be studying that A plus, that Net plus, or that next thing, you have to be passionate about the field you're getting into, and you have to be that lifelong learner if you're going to migrate into information security or ethical hacking. Now, back into my story. I approached my job and I said, I want to do security here. We were what is called an MSP, which is a managed service provider. They have MSSPs, which are security, managed service provider, security service provider, which do focus on security. And I told them, I said, I want to get into security. I want to build upon that career. And they told me, we don't really see that happening here. And I was kind of torn because this was the company that took a chance on me. This was the company that paid for some of my certifications. But at the same time, I felt like I was outgrowing them and that there was so much more. I talked about needing to have experience potentially, or needing to get, these certifications for hacking and pick up these extra skills. And while I was studying and learning, I felt like I'd maxed my potential. I learned all the clients that we had. I had learned their software. I learned the basic troubleshooting problems. I was promoted several times when I was there. I went from being a level 1, which is just working a desk, to being level 2, which is doing repairs on site, into being a network administrator, which was a lot more advanced work compared to doing the help desk stuff. And it was great, but at the same time, I felt like I could move on and do something else. So again, I started applying for jobs. And I applied for jobs in the area. I started applying for network engineer positions because I thought that moving into a pen test position, I really wasn't ready. I needed to focus on something else. So I moved into applying for these network engineer positions. And again, I found myself in the same situation. I wanted to apply for these jobs, and I just kept coming into, well, you need a CCNA. Well, you need 4 or 5 years of experience. You need all these things. And I didn't meet any of the criteria yet again. So I took my lesson that I learned from the first time around of not paying attention to the requirements, just ignoring the requirements, and applied. And eventually, this organization called Sandia National Labs, which is a research facility, it's a Department of Energy research facility in the United States, reached out to me and said, hey, we're interested in talking to you. So I applied for a network engineer position. I had the interview. The interview goes fairly well, but the big issue comes up that I don't have a CCNA. And most of my experience with working with Cisco, and they were a Cisco shop, most of my experience working with Cisco was from a GUI or a graphical interface that I could kind of point and click, enter in commands, and it was great. They were all command lines. So CCNA was super important. It was very important to be able to understand the configurations that were in front of you. And again, I was in a situation where I really wasn't the most qualified out of all the people that they interviewed. But at the same time, I told them, I said, look, here I am. I promise you that I'm dedicated to this job. I want to learn. This is something I'm passionate about. And I promise you I will get my CCNA if you bring me on board. And that did the trick. They actually called me back and they offered me a senior position at the company. They were very thrilled to have me. They thought I interviewed very well and brought me on. And within the first month, I got my CCNA at that job. I held my promise as well because I was passionate. I wanted to learn. I wanted to know more, and I was hungry. I was motivated. So you gotta be hungry. You gotta be motivated, especially if you're going to be moving up. You cannot be complacent again. So always be hungry. Do not be complacent. And ignore the job requirements. These are the lessons that we're kind of picking up over time, all right? Now, moving on, I knew the ultimate goal was that this was a stepping stone. I didn't want to be a network engineer forever, but I was there, and I didn't want to say I was paying my dues, but I was definitely using this job in order to get to another one. So I had found out at the job that there was the opportunity to work as a pen tester at that job. Okay, so I met with some of the pen testers. They had a whole nother division that did pen testing or ethical hacking. And they told me, look, go get your OSCP certification and we'll bring you on. So I asked for the OSCP certification from my boss. Boss said, yes, I'll pay for it. He knew my intentions and he covered the OSCP, and I studied for the OSCP and I passed the OSCP, which, if you don't know what the OSCP is, it's an ethical hacking certification that is kind of like a golden ticket. It's practical, so you have to hack into so many machines in order to get your certification, and it's respected at least as getting your foot in the door in the industry. So I went out and got that, and I went to the job and they told me, well, actually, you don't have a computer science degree, so we can't hire you. It didn't matter that I had the piece of paper that they wanted, or the OSCP, or the passion, or anything else. And this is government, okay? They said, because you do not have this piece of paper that says computer science on your background, we're just not going to hire you. So I was distraught. And again, I was back at the drawing board, but I ended up finding a career again. I ended up being outgrowing that and ready to move on, and started applying. And some of the things that I found when I was going through my job application process into trying to apply for ethical hacking jobs was there was a lot of gatekeeping all around. Okay, there's a lot of gatekeeping. The OSCP certification is great. It will not necessarily get you into an interview. There are not many opportunities either. So for me personally, I had to be willing to move or go into other jobs. And that was a little bit stressful too, because I had a girlfriend or fiance at the time, and who's now my wife. But at the time, she had grew up in New Mexico. She had never left New Mexico. So convincing her to move with me was going to be difficult as well if we had to do that. So we get to this point where there's a lot of gatekeeping, and you saw gatekeeping too with the whole degree certification type deal. So it takes a lot of time and patience. Patience is absolutely critical. And networking is another thing that I think is critical. So if you are not networking now, you absolutely need to be. I was a part of a Slack group. I was a part of Discord channels. I was just, as a whole, out there and making friends with people. I was talking to people when I was doing my OSCP certification or studying for it that were also studying for it. I think that really helped. I would talk to people that were already working in the field. I would just get general advice. And when it came time to looking for jobs and applying for work, a lot of the chances and interviews that I had came from those people. So being able to network and establish those relationships and connections, super, super important. Now, eventually, I made my way into the field. I got quite a few interviews, and the interviews that I had in front of me were really, there was 3 of them. One was a job that was from somebody that I was networking with, and it was 40% travel, which is a lot of travel. You're gone pretty much every other week. Another job was a job where there was a good opportunity. It was completely work from home. I wouldn't have to move. But at the same time, there were 55 hours a week that I'd have to be working. The job would have no hand-holding. When I talked to the manager, he told me that you need to come in, you need to be prepared to work, and we're not going to really teach you anything. You just need to pick it up as you go. Personally, I wanted somebody to hold my hand and train me. I wanted good work-life balance, so the 55 hours a week wasn't going to cut it. And then I found a job where they said, hey, you're going to have to move. You'll be remote most of the time. You'll work from home. But if you have to go on site, you have to be near us. But at the same time, we'll pay for your training. You're only going to work 40 hours a week, and we're going to teach you. We're going to train you. We're going to make you into a better pen tester. And that, for me, was the best choice out of it. So I was very patient, and that's another key takeaway here, is to make sure that you're patient with your job. A lot of people I see make the mistake of applying for any job and every job and then taking the first one that comes. And it can be exciting to get a job offer, absolutely, but you want to make sure that the job that you're going for is going to make you happy. So make sure that it's going to make you happy. I was not going to be happy if I was working 55 hours a week, and especially if nobody's going to be there to hold my hand, help me with training, etc. So make sure that you're happy. Now, when I was in my pen test job, I started working on my other passion, which is teaching. And I had made it into pen testing. I was very excited, but I wanted to give back to the community. I wanted to give back what I was learning. And I started with creating a YouTube channel. And I started with making walkthroughs. I started making lesson plans and courses and just doing all the stuff that related to my passion. And over time, my channel started growing. And I think I told you at the beginning, we're somewhere, I think, at 140,000 subscribers. I mean, it grew pretty significantly to the point where my write-ups, my walkthroughs, my video content, people were starting to recognize my name. People were starting to come to my job, and it had been a couple of years since I had been at my job now, but they were coming to my job and they were saying, hey, Heath works here, right? Can we get Heath to do our pen test? Because we know who he is and we like his style. We want him to do our pen test. And I wasn't seeing any of this action. I wasn't seeing any money, no referral bonuses, nothing. It was just like all these people are coming in. So the wheels start spinning for me that maybe it's time that I go into business for myself and leave this side behind of working for somebody else. And that's what I did. I went into business myself. I started this training academy. I started doing courses. I started doing client engagement work and migrated into being my own self person. But I want to kind of talk about it at a high level. I've kind of walked you through my life story, but there's so many little lessons to take away into being this ethical hacker, being on this journey into ethical hacking that I think are super important. So we start back with the beginning where we talk about you need to ignore the requirements. Okay, if you're applying for jobs, you want to get into this field, ignore the requirements. And if you wanted to get into this field too, Google is going to be your best friend. If you want to be a hacker, do the research, understand what you need to do. You can actually ask dumb questions in the cyber community. If you do not do your research and you go into a community and you just ask a question, I'll give an example, by the way. One of the questions was that somebody has taken the time to email me before is what is the password to log into Kali Linux? Which it used to be root Tor, and now it's just Kali. Somebody took the time to email me that question. And this has happened on at least 10 occasions, by the way, if not more. But they could have gone to Google, asked that question, and figured it out. So that tells me that you're not putting in the work, you're not doing the research. And we get these questions all the time. So make sure you're doing your research and you're using Google effectively and you're creating a life lesson plan. Once you start to understand the plan that you want to take and the path that you want to go down, then start applying for jobs that can get you there. Like help desk is great. SOC analyst jobs into pen testing, great. Network engineer, great. But you have to understand the requirements of what you need to do to get here. If you want to be a good hacker, you have to have a Linux foundation. You have to have somewhat of a coding foundation. You have to have a network foundation, and then you build upon that. You start to understand the methodology. You start to understand the different types of network attacks and web app attacks and wireless attacks, and you build upon it. I'm not here today to tell you XYZ, this is what you need to do. There's research that can be done for that, but I'm telling you the huge career advice that I can give you into getting into this field. The next best thing here is complacency. Please, if you want to be successful in this field, do not do it for anybody else but yourself, and do not be complacent, okay? Couple things here. You will encounter people that will tell you you're studying too much, you're doing too much. You need to take some relaxation and hang out with me, and that's okay. It's okay to do that as long as you do that in moderation. But do not be like the people that you see that are in the same position for 10 years and have no desire to move up. Because if you're in this field, you need to always be studying. You need to always be thinking of the next thing. Now, I told you we're going to talk about money. We're bringing back money. Money is a huge motivator, but you have seen now that I haven't talked about it since I was talking about accounting. All the way that I got through accounting, I was talking money, 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 because that's all that was on my mind. When it came to ethical hacking, it was just, what can I study next? What's the next thing? I love this field. I'm passionate about this field. The money's fantastic, by the way. In the United States, my first job was $102,000 a year. When I left that job, I was making $140,000 a year. The money's great, but it was never something that was even on my mind. Like I was so passionate about hacking. I was so passionate about IT that it was what I really wanted to do. And we see in this field, we see a lot of people make the mistake of using money as a motivator. Or the other motivator is that hacking sounds cool. It just sounds awesome. It is awesome. It's sexy. It's great. It makes a lot of money. But there's a reason why it is this way, okay? And this is not to discourage you. This is to motivate you. The reason why we have this is basic economics. We're in the time frame right now where we have not enough pen testers and a lot of people wanting pen testers. And what does that mean? That means high salaries. Why is that happening though? Because people are thinking, I want to get into this field because it sounds cool, but they do not realize the amount of work that it takes to get into this field. You have to be motivated. You have to study all the time. It is a lot of work, but it is incredibly motivating. For me, when I sit down and I work on a project and I work on hacking, I just lose the track of time. I'm absolutely in love with it. I never think about, man, this is work. Every day that I went into work as an accountant, I thought, when is it 5 o'clock? How can I get out of here? Can I get out of here any faster? It's never like that for me anymore. And it shouldn't be like that for you either. This should be a motivator. I know plenty of people in this field that will work and then they'll study. They'll work or they'll build a lab. They'll work and they'll play Hack the Box. They'll do other stuff that's just fun for them. So you have to make sure that this is something that you absolutely want to do before you get into it, but it is incredibly rewarding if you do. And these are the minor motivators for you. So always study. Don't be complacent. Don't do this for money. Do this for passion. If you're interested in getting in this field, feel free to reach out to me again on Twitter. You can join my Discord community. There's plenty of options for you. There's a lot of free training. There's a lot of cheap training. There's a lot of guides out there on how to break in, but you have to make sure that this is for you. All right. So hopefully that makes sense. This has been my talk. We have a shortage, and I want to see all of you make your way in here, and I want you to be passionate and be motivated and want to be ethical hackers. So the next time that you think about the bad guy in the hoodie, think about how you could be the good guy helping prevent that. Think about the other side. If you didn't know that ethical hacking was a thing until today, think about the good side and the things that you can do there. Think about the motivators that I've talked about and the life lessons. And it doesn't just apply, by the way, to ethical hacking. It applies to everything. Ignore the job requirements. Don't be complacent. Study hard. Be motivated. Be passionate. Don't chase the money. The money will find you. Okay? Don't chase the money. The money will find you. Find passion in your life. Use it to motivate yourself. Do what it is that you want to do and find success. Thank you so much. I really hope you enjoyed this talk. I hope that you enjoy the rest of the conference as well. Cheers.